Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Naeem Mushtaq here. Keep smiling and keep moving. Today, we are very blessed and honored to have Brother DeWayne Owens, who is a speaker, author, trainer, and official chaplain at Zig Ziglar Corporation. And when it comes to Zig Ziglar changed my life also and changed the lives of millions of people on this planet. And I was talking to Brother DeWayne Owens that please, if it is possible, I would like to hear your story, and I would like to see how Zig Ziglar changed your life and what was your relationship with Zig Ziglar, and tell us something more about it. So thank you very much. He's joining us from Texas, USA, and I'm in Pakistan right now. Is 9 p.m. and there in your place is 11 a.m. I guess.
11 a.m. Yes.
Yeah, lovely. So welcome to my show, and tell us something about yourself first.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Dr. Naeem, for allowing me the privilege to be on your show. I want to also commend you for your efforts in interfaith dialogue and bringing together the commonalities of religion so that we can have some civility between each other and the way we get along as human beings. So again, commend you for your efforts on that. Also, from your opening statement, I would think that you would think today's a good day to have a great day, huh?
Exactly. It's a great day, yes.
It's intentional. And so I would say going into intentionality, that was one of the greatest things that I learned from Zig Ziglar, my mentor. As you alluded to, he was huge. He was great when it came to personal development and training your mindset. Prior to meeting Zig, I grew up as a military brat. That's what we call it, a military brat. In other words, my father was in the Air Force, and literally every 3 years that we moved around, it was from state to state, abroad. Grew up, did some schooling in Japan, in Europe, and so I kind of had an international flavor growing up. One of the things that I would say is that my parents, they took us to church, but we really didn't have a real significant relationship with God. So we would pray over the dinner. Pretty much that'd be the extent of the spirituality in our home. And so Zig was the one who came along ultimately and made a difference in that area in my life. I would say that growing up, and I'm just being transparent, my father was a great provider. He was a military man. He was a soldier. He grew up on good principles, and he took care of his family without a shadow of a doubt. I think the thing that was lacking in, say, my father and my relationships was a sense of intimacy between father and son. And I think as a result, I was always trying to, I would say, please my father, and I always felt like I was falling short. So one of the big dreams I had growing up was playing in the National Basketball Association. Of course, I found out realistically that wasn't going to happen. And so when I stepped on a college campus with that dream still intact, and I found out that I just did not have that athletic ability, I lost the dream. And inside of me, I became somewhat depressed. Playing basketball was my plan A, but I did not have a plan B, Dr. Naeem. And as a result of that, I allowed myself to be open to some of the social nuances that took place on a college campus back in the early 80s. And at a typical college campus, of course, you have the academia that's there, but you also have the social life, which consisted of a lot of parties, particularly of drinking and smoking illegal marijuana, things of that nature. So I became party to that particular aspect of life. And what started out on a college campus as a small, what seemed harmless recreational usage of marijuana over the next 15 years grew out to a full-blown addiction, where not only I was smoking marijuana every day, but I was drinking heavily. I was sniffing cocaine. I was doing crack cocaine. Somehow I was a high functioning addict. And so I was able to do these things on a daily basis, yet I was able to maintain a job. And it got to the point, Dr. Naeem, where I guess enough was just enough. I felt drained. I felt that I had no purpose in life. I felt that around the age of 35 years old, something just had to change. This just could not be what my existence has come to. I had achieved some things in life, but obviously I was very dissatisfied with myself. And so I started my search for some type of purpose, whatever that looked like, Dr. Naeem, I didn't know. But I remember for the first time going to a convention. It was on finances, and I'm trying to find out what quote unquote success is. And so I remember a couple of speakers mentioned someone I had never heard before, and Zig Ziglar was among one of those names. And so this guy Zig, but they highly recommended it. I look at his material, read his stuff, listen to his audio programs, and that's exactly what I did. So I went out, I bought his books, I bought his audio programs. Back then they were cassette tapes, right? If you remember that. And at any rate, I would listen to him daily and I would read his books. And Dr. Naeem, something on the side of me just began to transition. I began to feel something I had never felt before in quite a long time. And I would just say that was just hope for the future. That's what I felt, hope for the future. Okay. And I felt that I was more than my addiction at that time, that I did have skills, that I had talents, that I had something to offer the world. So I was convicted by these messages from Zig Ziglar. And not only that, but the mindset that he would intentionally incorporate, to think positive, to realize that mistakes are eventful. They're not you as a person, so don't personalize them. Goal setting, this whole world area of personal development I had never heard of before, but it was literally changing my life. And fortunately, or coincidentally, but we've heard the saying that coincidence is God's way of being anonymous. I lived at one point close to Zig Ziglar in his corporate headquarters when I was starting to go through this transition. And so to make a long story short, I was working out at a gym where his son Tom worked out at, and I had the privilege of meeting him. And by this time, Dr. Naeem, I had accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. I had changed my ways. I knew after listening to Zig that was what I wanted to aspire to do, was become a motivational speaker, a trainer, and author, to have a significant change in people's lives and to give them purpose and to recognize that if they have a dream, there's a plan that needs to go with it. So by this time, I had stopped cold turkey doing any drugs in 1996. Okay. And by the time I met Zig personally, it was around 1999, 2000, early 2000 was just when my first book was coming out. And the profound impact that he had on me is hard to put into words, because if you ever see Zig Ziglar on stage, he is just so charismatic. He is captivating. He is an excellent articulator of great messages of personal development. But to meet him in person, Dr. Naeem, he just seemed so humble. He just seemed like the guy next door, your neighbor. And that's what impressed me more about. I was absolutely impressed, like everyone else was, about his ability to do presentations in front of large audiences. But what impressed me more about Zig was the man he was off of the stage, the way he carried himself with such humility. I could see that in his heart, he truly had an authentic heart and cared for other people. I just know there are a few times that he would just go out of his way to acknowledge me, to let me know that he cared about me, that he loved me. And so he had he had a profound influence in the personal development area for me. So my dreams did come true. I went on to become a motivational speaker, trainer, and author. And all of that happened until I got the call to become an ordained minister and pastor. And Zig had a lot to do with that also. But that was kind of, in a nutshell, our coming together as two people. And he's been a great mentor, a great man, and just a great legacy. And I'm very proud to be associated with that organization still.
This is a very beautiful motivational story. Let me share with you my experience, and let me know if my experience, do you have anything connected with that? Because I can see my experience in action in your story. I am in Pakistan. and I have never been able to meet Zig Ziglar personally. And I am a born Muslim from a Muslim background. So the religion is different, the environment is different. But when I first time start reading Zig Ziglar, and I also started to listen his audio tapes and video tapes. At that time, I had a variety of options, like Brian Tracy is there, Anthony Robbins is there, Dennis Whitley is there. So many motivational speakers are there in the market. But I realized one thing in Zig Ziglar, which I wanted to share with you, that as a Muslim from a Muslim background, when you are reading Zig Ziglar, it's the impression I get, the spiritual experience I get, that someone else is talking behind those words, like a invisible force, like Holy Spirit is in action behind the words of Zig Ziglar. In most of his books, like See You at the Top, or maybe Top Performance, and other books, Secret of Closing the Sales, these are all professional books. But even when he is writing professionally, you can sense the presence of God in his professional vocabulary. This is what I was attracted to, because when he's speaking to audience about the improvement of their life, it's like a Sermon on the Mount. Jesus' message in a professional language without mentioning the name of Jesus. So this was the difference I found in Zig Ziglar message, because it connects you to Jesus without letting you know that Jesus is talking to you, or Jesus is trying to connect to you through Zig Ziglar. This was my experience. I just wanted to share it with you so that you can comment, coming from your story, from your background, how do you see it?
Well, I think you're absolutely on point, Dr. Naeem, and that was exactly my experience. Well, let me say this. When I first started listening to Zig Ziglar, I did not believe in a God, or I believed in the existence of some esoterical being, I would put it that way, but I had no relationship with God and basically lived a life full of sin, with no conscience whatsoever. And when I came across Zig, I was listening to some of the other people that you mentioned also, Brian Tracy, Les Brown, just great names in the industry. And I think the difference, I know the difference that separated Zig from the other speakers is that he actually got into the spiritual aspect of life. So when Zig talks about the wheel of life, and we address those 7 spokes, one of those spokes is the spiritual wheel. Or spiritual spoke, excuse me. So of the other 6 spokes, which pretty much consisted of career, finances, mental development, physical health, so on and so forth, the spiritual spoke was the one spoke in that wheel that I had no desire whatsoever to embrace. I've had people who had tried to witness to me about Christ before. I've had people who tried to witness to me about Jehovah's Witnesses before, people from different religions, but I never gave any credence to any of it. Basically, I was just going to live life on my terms, didn't believe that I needed a God. And so I would say with Zig, as excited as I was about the personal development and in other areas, that spiritual spoke, I would say it was intimidating to me to some degree. And the only reason that I embrace even going after it is because by this time, having listened to Zig enough times, he had credibility with me. I think he was a man of honor. I think he was a man of integrity. And I think he became successful because of all 7 spokes in that wheel. So because he had credibility with me, Dr. Naeem, I decided, okay, I'm going to start this journey towards spirituality, whatever that is. And so I remember going out and buying books on New Age religion and some other stuff. And some of the material, the content that I was reading in New Age literature was pretty self-serving. It didn't seem like it took much of a sacrifice from who I already was to become this. I just had to find a way not to feel guilty about the things that were definitely considered sinful in the Bible. And so this journey around this particular time is when I believe God brought along a beautiful lady by the name of Dolores Morales, who eventually became my wife. but she was with me during that transition. And I would tell her about some of the material that I was reading in these books. She was a Christian herself at that particular time. And she just basically asked me, when's the last time you've been to church? And by that time, it had probably been a good 15 years before I had stepped into a church. But I'm open to this spiritual spoke, Dr. Naeem. So she took me to a couple of churches, and it was upon visiting Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship with Dr. Tony Evans that the real transformation began. And to make a long story short, when I first heard him, that was the first time I believed that there was truly a God. And I believe the Lord used my wife to ultimately help me to embrace Jesus Christ. And so that changed my life. That totally changed my life. Zig was the catalyst for that. When you talk about hearing Zig and his words, and you can pick up on the fact that there's a spirit behind his words, you are absolutely correct. Zig will be the first to tell you that he has only obtained his success because of his relationship with God.
With God, yeah.
The teachings, the principles that he taught were all biblical principles, unbeknownst to me at the time. I just thought, wow, this is great philosophy. It's a great approach to life. It's a great mindset. I didn't realize that they were biblical principles at the time until I accepted Christ, started reading the Bible myself. And I'm like, wow, this is the same stuff that Zig teaches, except Christ says it a little differently than he does. But yeah, and the other thing about Zig was he's very candid about his faith. He always shares the fact that it was a Black woman from Yazoo, Mississippi, that led him to the Lord when he was 40 years old, broke, busted, and had no purpose in life. He frequently shared that. And he also had in his corporation every Monday what's called Monday morning devotions. And this is when people from around the country can come and give a devotion. But after every devotion, Zig would always give his testimony, his experience, his relationship with Christ. And so that was what I saw face to face with Zig, and then in conversation with him. So the spiritual aspect of his life is what changed everything. And I think he was brilliant and genius enough to be able to teach those principles in a way that wasn't offensive to corporate America. Zig would tell you very quickly, because I always thought of him as he definitely had the qualities to be a pastor and an ordained minister. And when I asked him about that one day, he said, no, I've not been called to be that. I've always known I've been called to the marketplace. And so even though he's called to the marketplace, and people don't want in the marketplace, in the corporate entity, they don't want to hear about God in any shape, form, or fashion. So he was able to find a way to brilliantly communicate God's message through a language that they could understand without knowing actually that it was coming from the Bible.
So the God is active through his men in every area of life. People who don't want to hear about God or Bible or the Holy Quran or Islam or Christianity, God still speaks to them through his people, and he has his own army. So Zig Ziglar was the pastor or the man of God, ordained by God himself to work in the professional industry, in the marketing industry, or in the industry of personal development, to use the same principles of Jesus Christ in 4 Gospels to communicate it to them in their vocabulary. And once they understand it, once they embrace it, then it is become easy for them to accept the biblical terminology. I think the most important thing, me as a Muslim working in interfaith dialogue also, I realized that terminology is not so important. The message and spirit is more important. So once you focus on message and spirit, the difference between religion sometimes is the difference of terminology and vocabulary, nothing else. But at the back, if you look at it, the message of Jesus, Muhammad, and many other religions, like is to uplift the humankind, uplift the mankind. And my favorite, passage in the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus says, on the day of judgment, a man will come to see God. The God will say, I was hungry and you did not give me something to eat. I was thirsty and you did not come me. And I was ill and you did not come to see me. And the man will say, how this is possible? The God will say, if you have gone to your brother to look after him, it is like you are taking care of me. So if you want to find God, you have to learn to share the pain and suffering of another human being around you.
Yeah,
And this is, I think,
you
what
have
Zig
to.
Ziglar did. He shared your pain and suffering with you, and he then pull you towards the Jesus Christ, and everything was gone, I think.
I absolutely agree with that, Dr. Naeem. You know, Christ said he came for the sick, not the people who were not sick.
Exactly.
And so we, as people of faith, we have to have an intentional mindset towards empathy towards those that are lost spiritually. And that requires acts of love. It requires really, because people could tell when you're not genuine. You know, and the piety of a lot of religious folks is a air or sphere of judgment. And so a lot of people who are lost spiritually, they don't want to dialogue with us because they feel that they're being judged. Anytime you look at Christ and he engaged someone, they felt comfortable in their own skin around them. And so I always tell people that proximity precedes theology. People don't care how much you know about God until they know how much you care about them in their particular situation. And so it's important for us to engage people, to ask them questions, to understand their hurt, their pain, to show that whatever you have to say to me is important enough for my time to listen to you. Hopefully I can give you some words of encouragement, or if there's a way I can help meet a need that you're going through. That's how we exemplify and reflect God that way. But as long as we're kind of pointing the finger at people and beating them over the head with the Bible and say, you sinful man, repent, 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 that's bringing no one to the kingdom. And so Christ has told us the format: love your neighbor as yourself. Treat people with dignity, treat people with respect, be a friend to them, pray for your enemies. And so that's not a suggestion, that is a commandment. And as a good soldier, soldiers don't bark back at orders that they receive, they just go out and they execute what they have been told to do. And how much more enriched is your own life when you can go out there and your purpose is to elevate the person, any person you meet. If you're sitting down having coffee with someone, if you meet someone in the elevator, be the first to say, hello, how are you doing? Hoping you're having a good day. You bring an atmosphere of positivity with you, but that positivity is engineered by a relationship that you have in God, because people can see through fakeness. They can see through fakeness, but they feel genuine authenticity when it comes to people really caring for them. And that's how you blow people away, by letting them know, I do care about you. I'm not judging you. You're flawed, I'm flawed, but that doesn't mean that I have to think I'm better than you, because I am not better than you. It's only by the grace of God that I'm sitting here in front of you, Dr. Naeem. By all accounts, I should be in prison or be dead by some of the actions and things I have been involved in my past. So I never take life for granted. And it is incumbent upon me to exalt other people, to make them feel the hope that comes in a relationship with God.
Since you are the official chaplain at Zig Ziglar Corporation, maybe I can suggest to have your own interfaith maybe group at the Zig Ziglar Corporation, and to start connecting with your neighbors, Muslim, Christians, Jews, Hindus, people from different walks of life, and develop maybe a Zig Ziglar interfaith group to have more influence in your community, because sometimes you see minorities are suffering because of their difference of opinion and religions, and sometimes the majority needs to connect with them. And there's a lot of possibility, and I'm sure and I hope that you are already doing this kind of work. One thing I wanted to ask is your picture at the back with Zig Ziglar, when this was taken.
That was a pretty significant day. I remember that day well. As a matter of fact, the photographer of that picture was Tom Ziglar, Zig's son. But I remember I had been into my motivational speaking career about a good 4 or 5 years and was doing well. You know, I left corporate America and took the leap of faith to go from a salaried position to becoming an entrepreneur. And I was speaking for a living, and I was loving it. And I woke up every day just on fire for that. But at the same time, because of that spiritual spoke we talked about, I also started to grow spiritually, became a part of a church group. And ultimately, our pastor saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and basically saw that I had the credentials to be an ordained pastor, a minister. And I remember the first time he talked to me about becoming that. And it didn't sit well with me, Dr. Naeem. I didn't see in me what he saw in me. I thought I was a perfect fit for the personal development industry, keynote addresses, trainings with corporations. But I love God. There is no doubt about that. And my passion came out. And so my pastor talked to me about that. I didn't feel comfortable about it. And I sat there and I just vacillated over the next several days about that, because I knew that if I was going to step in this realm, it was going to have an impact on my personal development career. And I didn't want to give that up. I loved it. I was doing well. I was doing well financially. And I thought, man, I wonder if I know there's a lot of other Christian motivational speakers out there. I mean, do they struggle with this also? And the first person I thought about was Zig Ziglar, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to meet with Zig and see what his take is on that, because I know that he was heavily involved in his church. He was a mentor leader in his church. And basically, just as you alluded to earlier, he was pastoral in his approach. And so that day that we took that picture, I met Zig in that office today. And I talked to him about that. I talked about how much he influenced me, how much I love the personal development industry. And I had to tell him, but I have felt like I am getting this call from God to become a pastor. Now, I know you're involved in the church, and I know all the things that you teach a Bible study course in his church. 500 people would be in attendance for that, the encouragers class. And I said, Zig, were you ever called to be a pastor? And without hesitation, Dr. Naeem, as I said earlier, he said no. He said, I've always known I've been called to the marketplace. So he had an assurance about that, whereas with me, it was a struggle. And Zig said, if God told you to do it, you better do it. I'm thinking, don't you have something else to offer behind that? And I got it. I understand it. We don't have to make anything that's simple complex, and we don't need to put a question mark behind where God puts a period. And so I received that call. And I would say for years, I just kind of struggled with how to balance those two, because I became all out for my position as a pastor in the church, yet and still I was kind of doing this personal development thing on the side. But to a degree, my passion for the personal development industry was not the same as it was for my God-given call. At some point later, Dr. Naeem, we did close the doors on that church. That's another story. But at any rate, I'm back out here again as a personal development speaker, trainer, and also an evangelist. So I have the opportunity really to embrace both worlds without contradiction, without vacillation. Whenever I have an opportunity to go out and speak to the corporate world about personal development, goals and goal setting and things of that nature, I do that. Whenever I get to go to a church or go to a prison or go to a homeless shelter and speak to people about God, that's what I do. So there's more clarity today. But since you asked about that picture back there, that was what was going on that day when he took that picture. He's a beautiful man. He's awesome.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. One last question. Have you written any book?
I wrote a book around 20 years ago. It's not a book that I continue to sell. And the reason I wrote that particular book at that time, I didn't have real purpose behind the book, but when I was just getting into the personal development field and speaking, my colleagues would tell me, DeWayne, if you really want to have credibility in this industry, you need to write a book. need to write a
Mm.
book. So I wrote a book, and the book really didn't line up with where I was in my speaking industry. So at this point, I don't have a book to offer. The good news is that I have a couple of books that should be coming out next year. So I'm expecting you to call me back next year, and next year I will have a couple of great books to offer. And
The
so,
reason the reason I wanted to ask this question, because what we are discussing today and your story itself is a book. Once you write your story, it becomes a testimony also, how God worked through you to change his people, his society, and your life also. So sometimes we write books to promote our business, our market identity, our branding, but sometimes we need to write to help other people to grow in their life. That's why the disciples, four gospels are with us. If no one wrote those four gospels, it would be difficult for us to imagine how Jesus would have looked like, or what were his commandments. So I think to continue that legacy, I would suggest, humbly suggest, and a brotherly suggestion also, is to write your story also, because your story also has a lot of, invisible, visible. It's like God in action, and your story can also motivate other people's, because his books change you, and your books may be able to change other people, and this is how we can continue his work. Well, anyway, thank you so much. It was so pleasure and honor talking to you. And not next year, but this year also, we will be in touch again for another episode, hopefully. And I'm sure all the brothers and sisters at Zig Ziglar Corporation will enjoy this interview. I do plan to get in touch with Brother Tom if it is available. I'll see if what is his response after this interview. But I am sure that Pakistani community and Zig Ziglar lovers. I have been in Saudi Arabia, and my ex-boss is a very deep lover of Zig Ziglar. And there are many people in Muslim countries, including myself. I have been involved in theological discussions, interfaith dialogue. But with interfaith dialogue and theological discussion and loving my own religion and religious identity, I think I'm clearly more in a position to see how Zig Ziglar was doing God's work. Because once you are connected with God through Islam, through Judaism, through Christianity, if that connection is genuine, you can see God in action in every religion. And sometimes you can see God talking to you through Brother Owens. Sometimes you can see God talking to you through Brother Tom. Maybe God is talking to you through Brother Zig Ziglar. God is everywhere. You cannot escape God. Maybe you hate religion, but he doesn't hate you. So sooner or later he will get you.
He's placed himself in every man's heart. So you can't escape him. We try to fill the void in, dysfunctional and unhealthy ways, but the only way to be holy is to be connected with God, and we have to have him to be the one that fills up that tank. And so
I think
I appreciate
men of God will realize and recognize them, whether they are in this religion or that religion. The divine connection and spark will connect with one another. Like I'm talking to you, you are there, I'm here. We never met, but we are connected through Facebook, and now we are talking to each other. And we are talking to each other, and we are both getting, some spiritual connection, and our strength in God is getting stronger. That is the beauty of being God in action, I think. So any last word you would like to say, the lovers of Zig Ziglar, and message for the audience?
Well, I would just say, for those who do not know Zig Ziglar, he has some awesome books that you can read. He has awesome teachings and audio programs. And the beautiful thing about what he taught is that it's timeless. It's priceless and it's timeless. I'll just share one other little thing with you. I was listening to Les Brown one day, and when Les was young on the speaking circuit, and he and Zig and a few other big time speakers were traveling around the country, they noticed that every time they go from one city to the next, that they would come up with a new presentation for each city. But what they noticed is that Zig said the same thing in every city that he went. And so they became curious about that. And one day they were having breakfast with Zig, and they said, Zig, all of us come up with new material for every city that we go to. You say the same thing in every city. Why is that? And Zig basically said, well, what I teach on is principles, and principles never change.
Never change.
And so, Dr. Naeem, the cultures may change, fads may change, social media may change, but the principles for successful living and being a good steward, being a good man for humanity, the principles for living harmoniously, they will never change. And we can never take for granted that people know them or they have been taught them. And so we are sent out as messengers in this personal development arena to give people medicine for thought that they have probably never heard of before, just as when I was 35 years old and had never heard any of those principles or philosophical approach to life that I heard from Zig when I started to change my life around. So for any of y'all who are not familiar with him, check out his material. For the rest who know him, just continue to strive.
Lovely. I'll put his website links in my in this video's description, and also your Facebook link also. So if people want to contact you, they can contact you. So thank you so much, and with the promise that we will be connecting again very soon, not next year, but this year also.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Naeem.